Everything about our reality is currently being debated. The future of work and AI, whether bureaucracy is killing civilization, and what the consequences of feminism and the feminization of civilization have been. If you're a young guy right now, you've probably thought about all of these things at some point, but Ted Kaczynski predicted the consequences of this in his manifesto 30 years ago. It's no wonder 400,000 people a month search for him online. But how did he nail all of these predictions so well? I've thought about this for a while, and the only way to understand Ted Kaczynski is through the eyes of famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. His idea of the shadow perfectly explains Ted Kaczynski and his ideas. The shadow is everything about yourself that you repress psychologically. The collective shadow is what society represses. Ted Kaczynski's manifesto is a stunningly intelligent representation of all that society represses. Think about it. You've probably been at work doing the same monotonous task over and over and over again and asked yourself, is this really it? Is this what life is all about? And Ted Kaczynski asked this question and brought it to its logical conclusion. This video is going to talk about how Ted Kaczynski's manifesto unveiled the dark underside of our society, how modern movies proved him right, and how the politics of the new right are merely a reflection of what Ted thought 50 years ago. All right, that's enough hyping up. Let's get into it. Well, actually, before we get into the video, let me say, obviously I don't support violence, and obviously I do not support what Ted did in any way. This is simply an analysis of the philosophy within his manifesto. Anyways, let's get started. Part 1. Ted Kaczynski's life. Before we get into the psychology and the philosophy of the manifesto, it's important to understand Ted as a man. He reportedly had an IQ of 167, making him smarter than probably anyone you will ever meet. And he got into Harvard at age 16, but he always had problems socializing. This is where Jung might say that he had a shadow due to his inability to socialize, and that if that shadow went unchecked, it would build into resentment. But that doesn't explain it all. So where did he go wrong? One clue might come from the CIA experiments at Harvard that he participated in as a part of MK Ultra. No, seriously, look it up. The experimenters tried to break down students psychologically by attacking their ideas and their worldview. But Ted was defiant. There's actually a documentary that has audio tapes from the experiments, and in one of the audio tapes, Ted can be heard attacking the experimenters and telling them that they're using logic poorly and that they haven't actually defeated his ideas. That doesn't sound to me like somebody who was shaken by the experiment. And even after this, Ted Kaczynski became the youngest assistant professor in UC Berkeley's history, but he quit almost immediately, and by 1971, he was in Montana in a cabin in the woods. The theme that comes up again and again is his resentment towards people and society due to his inability to understand them and relate to them. He showed traits that we now associate with autism spectrum, and honestly, even a lot of traits of antisocial personality disorder. And it's really kind of shocking that I didn't see any of this in the court documents, for example, but a lot of people who have looked at his case afterwards have concluded that he was probably somewhat autistic. Anyways, by the time he had moved to the cabin, he had already written the core idea of what would form his manifesto. In 1971, Ted wrote, quote, "The important aspect of personal freedom is the ability to direct the course of one's own life. This kind of freedom we don't have. There are a limited number of slots in society into which everyone must fit," end quote. He continues a little further down in the journal, quote, "The whole texture of life is determined by society. Consider all the evils that are imposed on the individual by the system. Pollution, the threat of atomic war, traffic congestion, bureaucratic red tape, the draft, destruction of wilderness, manipulative advertising," end quote. Sounds kind of like the rants of the main character in Fight Club, doesn't it?
We're consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession.
One professor even described him as pathologically shy. Ted's inability to integrate with society, combined with his resentment towards people in general, pushed him over the edge. What Jung would say about this is that he rejected the great father And the Great Father is a mythological character that is a representation of order, culture, and society. Ultimately, this caused Ted to become possessed by his shadow, much like Tyler Durden in Fight Club. But how did he, in his deep resentment, so accurately describe the problems of modern society? And how can we know that his description of these problems is even right? Part 2. The Collective Unconscious. One of Carl Jung's greatest contemporaries, psychologist Mary Louise von Franz, wrote that when people are alone for long enough, they can encounter the collective shadow of mankind. Remember, your shadow is all that you psychologically repress. It's your anger and your sadness, but also really it's the personality traits that you need to integrate in order to become a whole person. So with anger, for example, you don't actually need to get rid of it or repress it. What you really need is to channel it into something productive. The collective shadow, on the other hand, is all the traits that a society needs to develop to move on from the current stage that it's in. Ted Kaczynski's manifesto perfectly describes the contents of the collective shadow. We've long ignored the fact that society is becoming increasingly bureaucratic and computer-controlled to our detriment. Society also suppresses aggression, which leaves young men feeling cucked and powerless against an unknown entity. Carl Jung's writings showed that man's psychological state is best expressed through religion and stories. He says, for example, that Satan is a representation of the collective shadow. Jung said that we view reality through the eyes of a story, which is why people engage so readily with religious stories and novels. This has some incredible implications, because if novels are stories that represent the psychology of mankind, what about movies? I think that Jung would probably say that movies serve a similar purpose and that they're a kind of modern myth reflecting our modern psychology. There are incredible through lines in many movies like Fight Club, The Matrix, or American Psycho that reveal this modern collective shadow. This same shadow was seen by Ted Kaczynski. He called it the technological system. Before we get too deep into this, let me be clear. I'm not saying that Ted was a Jungian in any sense. What I'm trying to do here is a Jungian analysis of Ted's text to show the deeper layers of it. The most important idea that runs through Ted's manifesto is this: that human technology was designed to give man freedom, but the advancement of it actually encroaches on our freedom and slowly takes it away. Every step forward with technology limits freedom more and more, and if we continue, man will become a slave to technology, according to Ted. He said that with more and more technology, we'd need more and more bureaucracy because we would need to manage all of these different parts of technology as it grows larger in scale. The bureaucracy and growth of civilization created another problem. Most people's jobs are almost meaningless in the grand scheme of things. This idea is illustrated by the Fight Club narrator in the opening scene.
Through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines me as a person? I had it all, even the glass dishes with tiny bubbles and imperfections, proof that they were crafted by the honest, simple, hard-working indigenous peoples of wherever.
Ted uses this phrase called the power process to describe why man feels alienated from his work. He says that most of what people do is restrictive and doesn't allow people to be creative or to actually engage meaningfully with their work. The only requirement to be a good worker in most cases, according to Ted, is obedience. So when you work in an office, you do get your needs for food and shelter met by your pay, but it's not quite enough to release all of your energy. This was a major theme of movies in the 90s like Fight Club and Office Space. You push paper all day, and for what? You feel like your soul is being sucked away from you. If you're a man, you probably feel like all of your aggressive primal drive has been stripped from you. In the movie Fight Club, the main character suffers a psychotic break in which the aggressive part of his personality becomes Tyler Durden. This is what Jung would call shadow possession, and this same shadow possession is what affected Ted when he ultimately began performing his evil acts. Tyler Durden, in this shadow possession, represents an aggressive man who takes what he wants from the world. In many ways, this taking of what you want is what's missing from modern man, albeit perhaps not in this aggressive, violent way like Tyler Durden does. Tyler Durden, in a sense, is Nietzsche's overman, who takes what he wants from the world. He's everything that Jack, the narrator, wishes he could be. He's everything that modern man wishes he could be. But modern society, as Ted points out, represses this type of aggression. You must conform to each and every bureaucratic rule that is imposed. American Psycho, another darling movie of the new right, also showcases aggression in its raw and chaotic form, much like Ted Kaczynski's. You see these tweets all over right-wing Twitter of the main character. He seems to be kind of a spirit animal of the new right. It represents the true darkness that masculinity could become if it is repressed for too long. It's representative of the deep collective shadow of masculinity in modern society. Movies like Fight Club, The Matrix, or American Psycho are popular on the right and with men because they represent the collective shadow that's formed due to resentment against feminism and the feminization of society. Ultimately, this led to the formation of the new right, and most of the politics of the new right can be thought of as pragmatic political solutions based on Ted Kaczynski's ideas. Part 3. The New Right and Ted Kaczynski. Ted's ideas have gone mainstream on the right, with many on the online right calling him Uncle Ted. Tucker Carlson even wrote a book called Ship of Fools, which is directly referencing a poem written by Ted Kaczynski about the downfall of society due to leftism. You've probably heard people online say things like, feminism and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race, which is a direct reference to the first line of Ted's manifesto. In a lot of ways, Ted Kaczynski was a prophet of the New Right's ideas. The ideas that formed Ted's manifesto were formulated long before people like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, RIP, were fighting the wokes and cancel culture. But this connection goes much deeper than just using some phrases of Ted's or even using ideas of Ted's. It's the spirit of Ted's critique that lives on, ultimately in political action by the new right. Though half of Ted's manifesto is devoted to attacking the psychology of leftism, a good bit of it is devoted to bureaucracy. And what we've seen is ultimately a lot of policies of the new right aimed at taking down the bureaucracy. And most young men today know exactly what I'm talking about. We've all dealt with HR managers who have brought us in for some politically incorrect joke or for looking at someone the wrong way and have had a talking to about needing to be more sensitive or some other nonsense like that. You've seen how three-letter agencies seem to creep into every corner of your life. Hell, even parking in a major city is such a hassle. It's such a bureaucratic hassle. Drive here, walk here, park in this spot, pay $25, or it seems that every detail of life is controlled in some way. And ultimately, you're not free. That's why Trump's attacks on the deep state hit so hard on the new right. The MAGA movement basically took an idea similar to Ted's resentment of bureaucracy and turned it into a political mission. Cut the red tape, smash the bureaucrats, and drain the swamp. And it wasn't just talk. Elon Musk literally set up the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, with the explicit goal of gutting useless spending and tearing down bureaucracy. That's Ted's critique of the bureaucracy being institutionalized. And then there's the whole surveillance capitalism aspect of this. Postmodern philosopher Michel Foucault came up with this idea of the panopticon. And hear me out. I know you might not like postmodernists, but this was actually a really good idea. He said that modern society works like a prison. One central watchtower, everyone being watched. And because you don't know when you're being watched, you start policing yourself. That's exactly how many Zoomer guys live now. Every post, every joke, every word is under watch on social media. So you hide in group chats. You make anonymous Twitter accounts with bird pics and VPNs just to say the most basic truths. That's the technological system that Ted defined. Always watching, always ready to clamp down on you for not being socialized properly. It's the shadow of society, the thing that everyone feels but can't quite name. Young men want to be funny, politically incorrect, and honest, but the system ultimately just won't let them. That's why the new right has been such a big advocate of free speech and of talking on college campuses. People like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, again, RIP, who go and actually talk to people and say these things that they're saying in their group chats and afraid to get canceled for. The new right represents this manifestation of an anti-establishment and anti-bureaucratic sentiment. Most of the ways that the new right has been going about attacking all of these critiques have been much better than Ted Kaczynski's. Ted Kaczynski's actions ultimately represented darkness that we could fall into, that humanity could fall into if it does not address the shadow. Resentment of the system, even if rightfully so, if not channeled to creativity and creation of new things, could be chaotic. Carl Jung said that the shadow needed to be integrated with an individual, not destroyed. Changing the world through political action and addressing society's ills by introducing policies and ideas into the marketplace of ideas has ultimately helped to address many of the issues that Ted Kaczynski had feared. Many of the aspects of the collective shadow have been addressed through political action and through the creation of new ideas and new ways of thinking. However, there remains the possibility that we could fall into the resentment and the vengeful actions such as those of Ted Kaczynski's. But those represent the worst of what could possibly come. And ultimately, if we fall into the actions of Ted Kaczynski, the violent ones, then we will become prophets of destruction. Because what Carl Jung would say, and I think what Charlie Kirk would say, is that even if we take down the bureaucracy successfully, even if we're able to go after all of these policies that are restrictive and that hold us back and that restrict freedom, if we put nothing good, beautiful, or true in their place, then ultimately we have been nothing more than what Ted Kaczynski became, which is a prophet of destruction.